Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. The No More Noise Toronto presents The Night Economy with Dr. Arline Bronzaft. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto. And we are a grassroots organization that takes a data and process-centered approach to looking at our noise bylaws and improving how our city sounds. We're looking at noises that wake us up, keep us up, and disturb us during the day. So with that, I'm going to get started here and share my screen, and we're going to go to, we'll just go through what we're going to be looking at today. I've got lots of information for you. I hope you can see my screen. Arline, are you able to see that PowerPoint presentation? Awesome. Thanks so much.
Right on.
Great. Okay, so today we're going to do, I just introduced myself. We're going to have an introduction from Arline. I'm going to give you some background, some context on the night economy, how we got to where we are today. The big thing is that we're going to go through the Good Neighbor Guide. And this is a document that the city is working on right now and is going to be presenting to the Economic and Community Development Committee later on this year. And we'll get more information on that. We're also going to do a Q&A. We'll do the hands up function for that. And then we'll have a bit of a wrap up. I always want to get your feedback. And so I use Mentimeter, and that is a way for you to provide anonymous feedback. You can scan the QR code with your phone. You can also go to menti.com and enter the access code 64971876. And that will get you through the questions. You can scroll forward, you can scroll back. I've provided lots of places for you to provide comments, and those comments have 200 character maximums. So you don't need to finish it all in this session. There's a lot of information there, but keep that window open on your phone or on your computer, and then you'll be able to go back because the survey will be open until after our meeting that we have on September 19th at 7 p.m. So this is a webinar format where you don't have access to your mics and to your video, but on the 17th or on the 19th on Thursday, you will. So I hope you participate in that. So as I mentioned, this is a webinar, so we're going to be using the hands up function for Q&A. I hope we get some good time for Q&A. I got a lot to share with you today. So just as a note, we expect respectful communications towards other participants and city staff in the chat. I do have somebody moderating the chat, so thank you very much for that. So name calling, personal attacks, not appreciated, but I do understand your frustration. I want you to know that. I feel it too, but we want to create really good relationships with the city because this is how we move forward. So city staff attend many No More Noise Toronto meetings, so assume that they're here and they want to learn and they deserve to be treated with respect. They're really trying to do their best in the framework that they have. So, as I said, No More Noise Toronto is a data and process-oriented grassroots organization. We've been around for just about a year. We started with the public consultations that happened for the noise bylaw last fall, and we're here, and we're still here, and we've created really good relationships with the city. And one of the most important relationships that I've developed is with Dr. Arline Bronzaft. And so I am going to now bring her into the co-spotlight, add spotlight. There we are, Arline. And
thank you.
She's a member. She's been advocating for noise reduction in New York City for decades, in the city that never sleeps. And she's managed to somehow carve out this amazing niche in the city's city structure to be able to influence that. So before I hand it over to her, I want to let you know that we talked about our starting position, and I need a little bit of help with this. So our starting positions are that businesses should benefit a community and that the host community accepts them as neighbors, and that we understand that there is a reciprocal relationship there. The night economy will not go away, so let's work on making it the best that it can be while recognizing that noise is a health hazard. And impacting our sleep is extremely harmful to our mental and physical health. And I've got links here for you. We will have other links further down in the chat, in the presentation, and also this presentation will be shared with you with all the live links. So with that, Arline, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your history with the night economy and New York City?
Thank you. Do you hear me?
I do. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm a psychologist, a psychology professor, and here I am involved in noise. And I have to thank Mayor John Lindsay. So we're going to go over 50 years ago when he introduced me to transportation problems. And one of those problems was noise. So I'm going to have to say my work started with the effects of noise on children's learning when they were next to an elevated train. And from then on, I got much more involved with the issue because I know people are suffering, and I am a psychologist. I was then appointed to GrowNYC, and this goes back over 35 years ago. GrowNYC is an organization that focuses on green markets, but it also has a section on noise. And if you go to GrowNYC's website and you type in noise, you will see how it covers noise, and that website will be presented to you in the chat. And I cover all kinds of noise. And one of the things that the website says, if you have a noise problem, contact Arline Bronzaft at the office, and then I get the complaint. And some of those complaints were indeed about nightlife, about venues that were playing their music too loudly, that people nearby could not sleep, and I had to intervene and try in some way to mediate this. But it turned out that when Mayor de Blasio took office some years after he first became the mayor, he set up something called Nightlife Mayor, and he named a woman to be the spokesperson for the nightlife industry. And it turned out that she did have a venue and it had received noise complaints. And so I knew I had to contact her and discuss this. And I was able to do this when the office to which she reported, that commissioner said, I'll set up a meeting. And I started to work with Ariel Pallets about 6-7 years ago when she was named the nightlife mayor. And it turns out that the nightlife organization will set up reconciliation meetings between entertainment venues and individuals. It's called MEND, MEND. It is mediation between the entertainment group and the residents. But I was also able to call her if I personally got a complaint and was able to say, look, can we resolve this? So having this ability to do that and working with the nightlife people was a positive, but they do have this mediating group. One of the things she then did, which I compliment her for, there was going to be a meeting of nightlife venues across the United States. And she got me an invitation to speak at that meeting. So that meant I was going to be talking about noise and the impact on nearby residents to venues across the country. After that talk, I was asked to be interviewed for a podcast in which we discussed, I and the person interviewing me, how we have to be concerned about noise, which is a health hazard, and how it contributes to problems in a community where there are venues. So here are the things that we now have. Oh, Ariel Pallets retired, a new person took over. She called him and told him to call me and introduce himself. So we do have a nightlife mayor. We have a nightlife committee. It has a group of people that function as individuals to hear complaints and try to reconcile these disputes. And if I get a complaint, I can personally contact that organization. And the other thing that this podcast, which has me interviewed by the national group, is circulated across the United States, I think speaks well of the group and that they were interested to learn about how noise impacts residents. And since we have a very exciting city, and we are very proud of our entertainment venues, we also know that people live nearby. And I have to say that if New York City can attempt to reconcile these disputes, I think other cities can. And Toronto is a city, as I'll let you know, I'm very close to. My mother is from Toronto, and most of my family still live there. So I can answer any of your questions, and just using my few minutes to show that New York City is trying to reconcile disputes between residents and entertainment venues when the music they're using for their customers intrude on the sleep and well-being of nearby residents. Thank you.
Amazing, Arline. Thank you so much. And I've started sharing my screen again because I wanted to make sure that people had a good chance to have a look at your podcast, to see the visual of it, and also to look at that QR code so that people can use that as a reference to understand how New York City is doing all of this.
Thank you.
Great.
And other cities. This went national.
Absolutely.
So it's from the Hospitality Institute. So I do want people to look at it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, so before I go into background, we're going to go into the Mentimeter. And here we are. So once again, here are the instructions for the Mentimeter, and you can scan that with your QR. You scan the QR code with your phone, or go to menti.com and enter 6497-1876. Okay, so the first question that I have is, who's in the house? So we have 17 people registered right now or online. So just curious, you don't need to answer this now, but we have 5 residents so far, and I'm assuming that it's going to be mostly residents as well that are able to. We got 6. That's great. And so this will be available to you afterwards, and I'm also going to be sharing that as well. And we've got 1 city staff, so thank you so much to that city staff person, because they clearly care about what you want to hear and what you think about the night economy. So I have another Mentimeter question, couple here, is what words come to mind when you hear night economy? So possibly intriguing, global city, sleeplessness, noise is, of course, so the larger the word, the more popular that response is. Noise, that's what we think of. Stress, inconsiderate, youthful city. That is disturbance, crowds. Okay, so let's look at the next question, which is, what businesses come to mind when you hear night economy? Restaurants, clubs, bars, restaurants. Clubs again, food service, concert venues, museums. I like seeing museums because, yes, the definition of the night economy is what takes place, the activities that happen after 6 p.m. and before 6 a.m. And one of the things that I really think we need to do is diversify what kind of businesses we think of when we hear the words night economy, because everybody thinks about bars, restaurants, clubs, and concert venues and music. But there's so many other things we could do. Sports just came in. That's great. Okay, and then I think I've got one more question here. Nope, I'm going to go back on that one. Okay, back to my presentation now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the night economy. So first of all, it's the definition is the social, cultural, and economic activity between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And this is right from the City of Toronto's night economy webpage, which they have 3 main objectives. They want to plan the night, they want to protect the night, and they want to create the night. So with planning, they're looking to have a strategic approach to municipal services, planning, and policy. So we're hoping to influence that on a way that benefits residents and make sure that we have our voices heard. Protect the night. So they want to provide a positive environment for all residents, workers, and visitors. So we are a part of that equation. And then also create a night, build the foundation that encourages a vibrant nightlife. creating jobs and spurring economic growth for Toronto. So the night economy, it's actually a global movement because all over the world, the economies that we the night activities that we had pre-COVID and maybe in the 20s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they're not doing so well. And so there's a global movement to actually prop up these businesses. And I'm fully in agreement with that. It just has to be done the right way. So I just got today an email on my Google Alerts about the Shed, which is one of Scotland's longest running clubs, is closing down. There was in Spain, there's this venue that they created, which basically increases the sound level coming out of it. So there's a company called Vibe Lab, and they produced the Nightlife Manifesto. And this was a document that was created by the nightlife community, basically raves, concerts, music venues, all that other kind of stuff. And what I want to make sure is that we always just have that balanced approach between, yes, we need to support those industries for sure. That's why I have my party shirt on here. I got my sparkly earrings on, but we also need to be able to sleep at night. So what the city did was they started by updating the zoning, and many of those businesses that you thought of in night economy are actually, they fell through the cracks with old zoning. So they needed to update the zoning, and they also created the Good Neighbor Guide for late night businesses. And that's what we're really going to start to dive into here. So the zoning changes. So places that were like bars, restaurants, but started to have live music, those kind of fell a little bit through the cracks as part of zoning. So in 2023, the city approved bylaw amendments to basically for eating establishments to use up to 25% of their usable floor space for entertainment purposes. More people want that. And they also allow for nightclubs outside of the downtown area, which is a little bit concerning for me. And I'll say that because we haven't managed nightlife well in the downtown area. Before we go to Etobicoke, Scarborough, and North York, let's figure it out here so that we don't multiply the problems that we're working with. And then there's something about amusement and arcades. And then there's new business license types. And so these will all come into effect January 1st, 2025. So my question, actually, that's my little icon here to twig me that I have a question for you. And that is, were you aware of the zoning changes that come into effect January 1st, 2025, pre this webinar? And so the answer, a couple yes, 7 no. Yeah, and I think a lot of people need to know about this and know that this is actually the way the city is going to start to manage some of these businesses better. So I'm going to go back now. So there's the zoning changes. So what happened is before there was noise control plans basically only for nightclubs. And now what they've done is they've made it there's a level 1 basic that is applied now to more restaurants and eating and drinking establishments. And the level 2 applies to nightclubs and similar venues. And I think, and so there's some issues that I have with this, and I've mentioned this at city council meetings and committee meetings as well. The level 1 is just an acknowledgement of the noise bylaws. It tells the availability of community-based mediation services to resolve noise complaints, and that's through TNC Community Services, and I've got a link to that further on in another slide. And the thing is that people may know about you, Arline, in New York, but I don't think people know about this group here. So this is the first time I think it's kind of going out. And the other thing that the basic one is information identifies all sound producing or amplification equipment on the premises. That's only when they start. What happens if they move amplified music out onto the patio? I'm not sure how that's going to be managed. And that's one of the biggest complaints. And as you can see in the chart on the bottom right, from the noise complaints, or the 311 complaints, eating and drinking establishments accounted for 61% of them. So this was this space that wasn't very well managed that they're looking at managing now. But what I want to share with you is that I don't think they've set themselves up for success, because upon request from the executive director of MLS, the businesses then have to supply, and this is for level 1, How and when the operator will monitor noise levels emanating from the premises, what action the operator will take to alleviate excessive noise, how they will address noise and loitering issues, what process the operator will use to engage with nearby residents, resident groups, and other establishments, and what process the operator will use to respond to persistent resident complaints. To me, this should be mandatory so that when a problem arises, which it probably will, the businesses are ready to address the issues. Now, if you have a late night hot yoga studio, okay, maybe you don't need to do this. But if you are a restaurant, a club, a bar, I believe, and if you have any opportunity for amplified music, I think that these should be mandatory. And the city knows my position on that. So now let's dig into the Good Neighbor Guide for Late Night Businesses. And I've got a ratty kind of copy here that I've been going through to look through this, and it's got lots of highlights and notes. So let's go through this here together now. So the Good Neighbor Guide is intended as a comprehensive resource for late night businesses, which are live music venues, bars, restaurants, retailers, service providers, and others. I've heard of takeout places that actually have amplified music outside on the sidewalk in order to attract people's attention. So this applies to a whole bunch of different kinds of businesses. And again, these are ones that are operate between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And there's a link there for the Good Neighbor Guide business. So next Mentimeter question. Have you heard amplified sound in your home past 10 p.m. from cafes or patios? A couple times a month? No, not applicable. One on some weekends, every weekend and some weeknights. So there's a few of you that get it on a regular basis. Some not applicable. Okay. Thank you for your feedback there. So what we have here is, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit there. So we're going to be focusing on sections outdoor dining and music, minimizing sound and noise, outside your venue, and resident and neighbor relations. So in the outdoor dining and music section, they talk about the different kinds of cafes. So that's sidewalk, curb lane, and private property. And Arline, when we were talking about this, you were mentioning, I think you called them shacks. Well, we call them cafes here. Okay. And we've got different kinds of cafes. And so here in our cafes, our live amplified music is allowed from May to October, basically up until 10 p.m. at night. And what we just saw in the Mentimeter was that people are actually being disturbed on a regular basis past 10 p.m. So I'm curious for New York City, I'm sure you guys had cafes and things spring up during the pandemic where people could eat outside and all of that. What has happened since that time? Do those cafes still exist? Are there less of them, more of them? What's happening in New York?
Oh, do you want me to respond now?
Yes, please.
Oh, a number of them were closed down. And New York also decided to come up with a standard shack. You had to follow certain regulations if you were going to use an outside facility for food. And that would have to be taken down during the coldest months. So we really have to see how it's going to work, because are people, are they following the rules that they have to take down shacks that don't follow the regulations stipulated by the city? Will they be taken down during those cold winter months? So I think really we're seeing this. I can say in my own neighborhood, a number of them have already been taken down, and we don't have as many as we used to. And I think that's probably true for the city, but the city will have to assess whether its regulations concerning the type of facility set up and only having that out there for the months of the year where you can sit outdoors. Will this turn out to be as the city wanted it? So remember, it's a new program and it's really starting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so back to sharing my screen. All right, so we now know from the Mentimeter, I'm just going to go back to that, see if anybody else added. So we've got 4 that are bothered every weekend and some weeknights on amplified sound from cafes in that season. Okay, next one. Next one, there we are. Okay, sure, here we are. Activate the window. Okay, so the next one is minimizing sound and noise. So we've got basically the noise bylaw in section 2.1 is the amplified sound. And this is where a bylaw officer could be called to investigate while the sound continues, but odds are that's not going to happen in time because MLS and the noise team operates on a priority action approach. So when a noise report comes in, they establish the priority there. So often what they will do is come back and the noise is measured from the point of reception where the complaint originated. And that is where, and I believe that there's actually, I have another section here where there's going to be some updates regarding this in September, which just came in. Yes, Arline?
Yes, I want to make a suggestion, if I may.
Yeah.
The only levels we can measure are sound levels. Sound is a physical phenomenon, which is measurable, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sound becomes noise when it's intrusive, unwanted, and we now know is a health hazard. I think if you're writing a code and you're talking about measuring sound levels, go back to that slide. It said
Okay.
the noise level. I would rather it say this. Let's see what it says. The sound level must be less than. If it's less than, that's not a noise level. I think you have to be careful with language. You all agree that when the sound is less than 50 decibels, that's permitted between 11 and 7. When the sound level is less than 55, that's from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. The sound level must be less than, not the noise, because then you're even saying that what's less is, I think I've looked at this document and I would caution the city to be careful in using language. In the preceding paragraph, the sound level is measured. You're not measuring noise level. Let me give you
subjective.
A quick example. If you were trying to fall asleep and your bed was next to a bathroom with a dripping faucet, even though that faucet has a low sound level, that can be very intrusive and bothersome, correct? So even low sounds. And the other thing, you're talking about dBA. I mean, we also know that there are low level sounds on the frequency measured by C that are intrusive. So I would like to make the suggestion that in looking at this document, you clearly differentiate sound and noise. Yeah. Because here you're saying that levels less than 55 are called noises. They're not, they're acceptable sound levels according to this document. So I really think language is important.
I agree with you on that. And that's where I'm using the word noise report versus noise complaint, because we're actually, we are not complainers and we're not being overly sensitive. We're reporting issues and health issues. And that's where I also want to say that I've measured many different places in the city and some of them never get below 55 decibels. So 55 decibels may not be the right number either. So I'm going to continue on here. So here's where I actually copied in some of the new information here. So the suggestions to minimize sound: close all windows and doors and keep them closed. And Arline shared with me a story about how she solved one of the problems by just simply saying, keep the doors closed and have 2 sets of doors, one so that one of them is always closed and sound doesn't bleed out. Be mindful of loading and unloading noise. And patron management. I hear a lot about people where when the bars close, people are out on the streets. There's no transit nearby, there's no washrooms accessible, and so people are, you know, using people's front yards as washrooms, and they're yelling and trying to get their Ubers and all of that. So we need to manage that as well. So there also are noise exemptions, and I wanted to highlight this because sometimes it is, oops, pardon me, let me go back. So it's with a noise exemption permit, noise levels are limited to 85 dBA or 105 dBc. Back to what Arline was talking about, dBA and dBc measurements. That's we're not going to dive into those weeds today, but it's measured from the lot line of the property where the event or activity is occurring. So we need to so there's some changes that are coming to the bylaws. And just as a note, for permits categorized as level 1 or 2, if the counselor doesn't respond within 14 days, then the application is approved. And I'm not sure that that's actually the right thing as well, that's the right process. The city did publish the noise exemptions in a table format. And what I did for No More Noise Toronto, we actually created a map. So when you get this slide, when you get this deck, you'll be able to click on that link and you'll be able to see a map of the noise exemptions in the city. I also wanted to highlight here agent of change for people to look at in the Good Neighbor Guide, because this is about if you are living in an area and an operator comes in, what happens, or if an operator is already there and residences are built around that facility. So this is about what is the agent of change, and I highly encourage you to have a look at that, because many areas in our downtown core, and that's going to happen in the inner burbs, Etobicoke, Scarborough, North York, there's residents living there. If you suddenly put a club in there or something that creates noise, or a loud restaurant bar, resto bar, people need to be aware of that agent of change. And it looks like I've got another Mentimeter. And this one is, have you had amplified sound disturb you in your home past 11 p.m.? And wow, look at that, 5 people every weekend and some weeknights. And there's some areas where they've got heated outdoor patios on the 2nd and 3rd floors. And then they've got condos everywhere around that. And that sound just emanates outwards. So we're talking about closing doors. How do you close a patio? How do you sound mitigate from a patio? So that's another question there. Okay, back to here. So outside the venue, late night businesses, whether a nightclub, live music venue, restaurant, event space, or other, should take all feasible steps to manage things outside the venue. So they're talking about parking and loading, crowd and line management, garbage, waste, and litter. I hear a lot about that when people, like if this is a Thursday night, when they're walking their kids to school on Friday morning, there's just litter and garbage all over the place. Maybe somebody has vomited on the sidewalk. Like, it can be really terrible for some residences, and it doesn't make them proud to have that business in the neighborhood. So that's where I think this reciprocal agreement has to happen. And they say outdoor access to public washrooms. That's not enough. There's not, I don't think, enough public washrooms. And that's where I scratched out outdoor and public. And I think that the club should be able to manage things so that if people need to come in and use the washroom while they're waiting for an Uber, they can. I think that's part of the responsibility of the club, to not load people full of alcohol possibly and then let them out on the street. To me, that's not good stewardship. But this is also where I want to talk about having other businesses that don't revolve around alcohol and loud music, because I think there's many things that I live in a condo, and there's many things that I would like to do at night that I can't, because it doesn't exist, whether that's hot yoga, shopping, a variety of other things. We have a 24-hour economy now. So I'm going to go back to my Mentimeter and ask you, I'm going to skip through a couple of these in an effort of time, because if you had amplified sound and it was measured in, if bylaw officer came to measure it, it may not have actually been a great experience. So if no report was made, yeah. Okay, so How can the city improve the noise exemptions process and communicate to residents? City measure at source, as many residents do not make the call to 311. Absolutely. I think that the city could be much more proactive. And also what I would suggest is that the city gets better at its communications regarding the noise exemptions so that people can prepare and leave the city if they want to. Next question here. So we were just talking about sounds, loading and unloading, people in the venues. Are there other night economy sounds that bother you? Vehicles and traffic. Yeah, that's often. And when I'm measuring with my meters here, I can see that at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a spike. There's a spike of people yelling, noise, traffic, Ubers. It's all of that. What time are we at? 12:37. So how can these sounds be reduced or eliminated? Get rid of vehicles, vehicle-friendly street design, noise radars to enforce bylaws. Could exempt some streets from traffic at night. I agree. I think that the city can actually do area sound level monitoring, which is again, just sound level monitoring, but that can go directly to the city. And if there's a issue where, if there's an issue where a club is being too loud or there's complaints, multiple complaints in one night, then the city can go and have a look and see what's happening. Okay. So resident and neighbor relations. We have here, this is kind of the meat of it almost. Building and maintaining good relationships with your establishment's neighbors, whether they're adjacent businesses or residents, is key for the longevity and success of your venue. So here's all of the things that they suggest. And this is where we actually have mediation. So there's mediation with TNG Community Services. If you go onto the city's noise web page, you will see that there's mediation there through TNG Community Services. So I'm not sure everybody knows about that. And I've got a couple more Menti questions here. And so if you have lived close to a late night businesses, what kind of relations have you had with the business? No issues and no communication. Well, that's good. 2 of you, that's awesome. Maybe some of you haven't gotten this far in the, okay, there we go. 1, communication with no changes. I found this question a little bit hard to ask because I wanted to know about the relationship that you have, because I know many people have tried to go and talk to the management of clubs and restaurants when they've been broadcasting sound, and they get very little response. And so I think that that's something where, again, going back to what shouldn't be made upon request should be mandatory is how these issues will be addressed. Let's prepare for what's going to happen. Next question. How can relations be improved? So this is where you have 200 characters to provide your responses. And again, all of these comments will be given to the city. And again, your responses are completely anonymous on the Excel sheet that comes out of this. Your responses are, your line is identified by a number. That is it. Okay. So I just want to show a little bit here about our data, because we are doing a data-centered approach. And this is where an outdoor festival that was actually managed much better this year than previous years. It was, so you can see here, so time is along the bottom and decibels are along the side. So this is all in dBA. dBc tends to be 10 decibels higher at least. So this is a box. These 2 boxes here are where there was an outdoor concert at Garrison Commons, so right down by Fort York. And this was taken approximately about 750 meters away from that facility. And so you can see here, it started maybe at about 6 o'clock and it went from 57.5 decibels up to, there's some here that reach up to 67. So it had an increase of over 10 decibels. And that's again, from quite far away. And this was, the residents, I understand, said this was managed better because last year their windows were rattling, there was buildings were vibrating and they could not sleep. And it also went on past midnight. You can see both here how the times drop off. So this was a well-managed concert. Here's an outdoor patio that was taken, so this was last summer, and this is a Friday, Saturday night. This one over here is Sunday. So again, time is along the bottom, decibels along the side, and you can see 000 is midnight. So these people had 62.5 decibels right outside their home at 1 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the morning. The person's house that I was at, she was pregnant, she was trying to sleep, and she was losing her mind. And so this is just where I think the city and businesses need to understand the impacts that they have on people and on the sleep. And so you can see that there's kind of amplified, there's little bits of amplified music every night here. And so they were literally a part of the party that they actually never got the invitation to. And the last one here that I want to show you is a nightclub. And so this is in an area of town here where there's a club and then there's a residence next door. And so this is inside. And what you can see here is again, time along the bottom, decibels along the side, where you see these raises of where it was quiet and then it went high. That's probably an indoor fan. But where it kind of goes a little crazy like this is where there's amplified music coming through the walls. And that is where amplified sound is. And so they are subjected to this till 4:30 in the morning. So this is what noise exemptions and hours exemptions, how this manifests in people's lives is that they then have music and bass beats until 4:30 in the morning. And even if it is only on the weekends, if you have that every weekend, that gets really tiring. So our recommendations is to make level 1 upon request items, make them mandatory, improve the reporting and enforcement process, measure noise at the source, don't leave residents with the burden, install area sound level monitors that send that data to MLS. Take us out of it. And then it just becomes a binary. It's like, are they too loud? Yes or no. And that's just according to the bylaws. It's not about us having to make reports. Fix washroom availability, fix transit, get people out of the area when you need to. Bike shares, dedicated buses, maybe to a subway or a GO train station. Educate the public about being a good neighbor. I don't think many people really understand their impact that they have on others now. And include party boats. So party boats, as I was reading the fine print, are outside the scope of the noise bylaw, yet people that live on the waterfront and are close to the inner harbor, during the summer, boom, 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 it impacts thousands of people. And so party boats need to be managed a little bit better. And support the businesses by improving ventilation and soundproofing. I think that's one of the biggest things. I like to dance and I like to have a good time, but I also want to sleep at night. And that's where making sure that the doors can be closed, that the ventilation is good inside, and the sound doesn't mitigate outside. So, and also be proactive and have enforcement with sound level meters. So there's my clue here to, do you have any other recommendations for the guide? I encourage you to go back and add some comments in here about how you think the Good Neighbor Guide can be improved. Again, this is going to be open until 9 p.m. on Thursday night. And I also, what kind of new businesses would you like to have open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? A bodega? None. Well, I'm encouraging us to think a little bit outside the box. As more and more of us are getting dense and living in condos, we don't have access to, some people don't even have places to stretch. Like if we want to do a craft, if we want to do painting, or we want to do woodworking, or we want to build something, we don't have access to that. We don't even have a workroom. Like we don't have places we can do this, and we don't have places where we can meet other people like us. So let's think outside of the box. Let's think about what other businesses can happen in the evening that don't disturb others. Hot yoga might be a great thing. So I really think we need to think outside the box, because the El Macambo, which any of you have been to, is just a really fun club. They are now diversifying. They are diversifying and going to, like, they actually did a funeral there. They are doing business events. They are looking at other ways of making money. I also think of esports. What about esports where I had a 17-year-old and they would go to these places and just watch other people play sports? Well, what if the clubs didn't need to stay open so late to make money and instead moved their business to earlier in the day and filled voids and gaps in our society that we have now where teenagers can meet? and they can connect and they can watch these things. So the last thing that I'm going to ask for your help with here is I'd like to come up with a position statement for No More Noise Toronto about the night economy. And so this is what I've come up with, is that businesses should benefit a community and the host community accepts them as neighbors. So what do you think? What would be, how would you tweak this, or what would be your position statement? I'm really curious to know. And with that, I am going to end with one more question, and that is, what do you want Toronto to sound like? So fewer engines, quieter, kids, family, nature, community, birdsong. I hear those answers a lot. So thank you very much for participating in those. I am going to go back to here. And let's see if we've got a few minutes here. I told you there was lots of information, so apologies for that. But
may I stress again, as you went on, the word noise was used within the context of a statement that should have used sound.
Ah, thank you.
And that is going to have to be something that the city look at carefully, that they used the word sound levels. You're not, well, when I talk about going to a ball game, and whether it's the Yankees or the Mets, and for you, the Blue Jays, that's those loud sounds you want, because it means your team is winning. We don't tell New York to stop the children from shouting at the characters of the Thanksgiving Day parade, nor do we say, keep quiet when the ball falls on New Year's Eve. Those sounds are permissible. They're sounds that are permissible. So I think really read the document carefully to say that you're not permitting noises, because if your definition of noise is intrusive, harmful, health hazard sound, then you have to be careful. And there are, as you say, some loud sounds that are permissible, right? We do permit that. So I think your document has to be carefully gone over to make sure that you don't use the word noise when you really mean sound levels. All right? I've seen
absolutely. That sounds great. So I have a question for you from somebody in the audience, and that is, what does New York City do about patio violators? Our condo building is dealing with patios that blare music Wednesday to Sunday until 3 a.m. My opinion is that patio licenses should be revoked if decibel levels are exceeded at any time and if closing times are ignored. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, in terms, I live in New York City. I have a patio, I have a terrace. The buildings, I live in a co-op. My building monitors sound levels. In other words, we don't get licenses. I don't understand. You get a license from the city to allow you to use music on your patio. That's not the way the noise code works in New York City. We have certain types of noise that are monitored by police, certain types of noise monitored by the Department of Environmental Protection, which has a noise code. And then we have apartment buildings and co-ops. And if you know, the people who live in apartment buildings have leases. Those leases entitle people to reasonable quiet. So if a child visited a grandmother once in 6 months and dropped a toy, you're not going to complain about that. Right. But if my neighbor was blasting music on the patio that is next to mine, I would bring that complaint, if I lived in an apartment building, to the landlord and say my lease is being violated, or to the co-op and saying my lease is being violated. So the person who asks the question, I would have to know the rules and regulations that people living in co-ops have to abide by. And if you have documents stipulating that, it's not the city that does that. Of course, if it was a patio of another building and that noise was disrupting me, then I would have to call the city to step in, whether it's the police department or DP. So what I have to say that in New York, we have different agencies that oversee different types of noise complaints. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but that person can contact me personally and I could discuss it.
That's awesome. Thank you for being so willing. You're just such an ambassador. I'm so thankful for you and the work you've done. The other question here, does NYC map its noise levels? Is there a noise map of New York City at all?
Yeah, we have different areas, and we do know that. I'll tell you what New York City also happened to New York City. Our state controller actually went out and looked at all the 311 complaints. This was back in, I think, 2018. And he actually wanted to know how New York City enforces its noise regulations when people make complaints. And that report can be, I worked with the controller, DiNapoli. That report, I think, is really well worth looking at, because it came back that most of the complaints to 311 are not responded to satisfactorily. Do you have a comparable report that's been done in Toronto of your 311 complaints?
I wouldn't say one that has analyzed exactly what they have and haven't been able to achieve. We've got service level agreements that are
an analysis by an outside authority. So when the report came back, the majority of the complaints to 311 in New York City were not properly resolved. That was a little embarrassing, I would say, right? But let me tell you how the city did respond. It increased the number of agents for the Department of Environmental Protection to handle those complaints. But in terms of sound levels for different communities, yes, we have identified which communities have higher sound levels, but that can also vary. So you have to be careful. But the key thing is that I would ask Toronto to do an analysis of the complaints that have come into 311 to see if the city is adequately enforcing their regulations. And by the way, laws are written. And one of the things I say, and I was the wife of an attorney and the mother of 3 attorneys, with all due respect to law is being written, and we need laws. The key thing is enforcement. And if you don't enforce your laws, it's not worth the paper it's written on. That's a pretty 100%. Strong statement. I 100%. Would ask you that when these laws are written, have you got a measurement or a way to assess whether they'll be enforced? What good is a law if you don't enforce the law? That's key. And that's true across the United States. Wherever I've spoken to people, right?
Yeah,
where there are regulations, they don't get enforced. And that's when DiNapoli did the report. He proved that here are all these calls about noise, and they're directed to the agencies that should resolve them. And the majority, the overwhelming number, were not. So please look to an enforcement monitoring of the laws to see if they really did the job they were supposed to do.
Perfect. Thank you. Absolutely. That came up throughout the whole noise bylaw conversations that we've had last fall. It is 12:56, so I'm going to do a soft close here. And Nancy, I did see that there was another, that you had a follow-up question for that. So I'm just going to do a wrap up because some people may need to drop off for 1 o'clock. And then we'll have, Arline has agreed to stay on for a few more minutes. So then we'll have a little bit more time for some chatting, some more Q&A. Okay, so next steps. I'm just going to share my screen here and go here. Okay, so next steps. We are going to have a discussion regarding this at 7 p.m. on Thursday. So there's the registration link to sign up for that. You can also scan that with your QR code. I think we've got about 13 people signed up for that so far. We are currently conducting an amplified sound study where there is a rooftop patio and there is a neighboring condo. and I'm on a number of floors to see how the sound travels across and up, and I'm measuring in dBA and dBc. I'm going to create a night economy hub kind of on my website where people can go to for resources. And again, we're working on this position statement. So I really want to make sure that we come up with something that is from the community. And the Good Neighbor Guide will go back to the Economic and Community Development Committee on November 26th, 2024. So that will be an opportunity for us to share our opinions. And the city is going to be holding a town hall in 2025. And that's with the operators and everything. So we need to realize that night economy won't really be going away. It's going to be here with us to stay, but let's make sure that we do it so that we can still get a good night's sleep, you know, and we can still enjoy our communities. So I've got some resources here for you. There is GrowNYC, Arlene's podcast, also City of Toronto links as well. And finally, that's my final slide always. Let's create a better Toronto by reducing noise. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And I want to thank everybody who came today. I really appreciate it. This has been recorded, and I will send out the Mentimeter and the recording as well very quickly after this is done. So thanks. Please visit nomorenoisetoronto.com and sign up for Noise News, because that's how you stay informed. So I want to just have a couple more questions here. There was a follow-up question from Nancy, and she was talking about not resident patios, but she was talking more about bar rooftop patios. So establishments, and this is, I also see a couple questions in here from someone else, and that is about fines for sound violators, you know, that kind of thing. So can you help us understand how New York manages sound that bleeds into the public space, that then bleeds into, from businesses into people's homes?
Well, yes, then you can call up. If it's an establishment, when you use the word patio, I thought of the resident.
Absolutely.
Then you have to go to an official. The other thing people also do in New York City, if they don't feel that they're getting satisfaction from a call, like 311, and the problem, they often go to their local public officials. And so city council people have also been involved in trying to help individuals solve some noise problems. At one time, several of them actually sent out brochures informing people about noise and what it represents and how it affects people and how to get it resolved. So you'll have to know that and if you go to GrowNYC's website, it really is most informative about what noise is, how it affects people. It lists podcasts. And what I suggest is that when people complain in New York City, it's best to do it as a group as opposed to a single person. Very often, a single person doesn't get a response, but when it's a group, and then you tell a council person, remember, council people count votes.
Yes.
And a few people start protesting, you get more action. And then let me give you a second line that I use. We know so much about how to lessen noise. We really do. It's not the ways that are missing, it's the will. And I use the example of my study nearly 50 years ago of transit noise affecting children's learning in a nearby classroom. It wasn't rocket science. It turned out there was a procedure the TA was looking at that would quiet the tracks and make it less noisy and not intrusive on the school children who were nearly a year behind in reading at the 6th grade because of that noise. If we could have done that 50 years ago, people say, how did you get them to respond so quickly? And we put in acoustical tiles in the ceilings of the classroom. The ways were there. I suggest that I use the word miracle because that's how we got it done. But the community protested, we had to press the media. So I think the other thing you have to focus on is the ways to quiet Just like I suggested closing a door to a bar, that isn't rocket science. We know how to do that. If you close, what about lessening the sound levels? We know the ways. What is lacking is the will. And
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that's one of the things with No More Noise Toronto is many of the groups that not we're working against, but many of the noise making groups, whether that's vehicles, whether that's construction, whether that's club owners, they often are organized and they know, and they actually have people who are paid to lobby and do all that kind of stuff, where we as residents, there hasn't been that coalescing force. And I think if my
critical.
one goal for No More Noise Toronto is to create a community.
And you have a greater voice.
Yeah.
Numbers count because
Yep.
public officials count votes.
Yes, they do. I've got one more question for you here. So what about, actually, I got a couple here. So fines for sound violations. Like I know for motor vehicles, if they're caught with if a motor vehicle has a loud muffler, it's this level for one fine, second
Right.
infraction, it's more, all of that. Is there anything like that for sound in your area? Do you think
Oh,
in New York?
Yeah, well, we're testing out sound meters for vehicles.
Yeah.
For my, and
Yes.
that was pilot
But-
stuff.
But
And then
amplified sound?
Yeah, if you're a modified vehicle, but in terms of violations, if you have a loud sound and DEP issues a violation, yes, you get fined a certain
Yeah.
sum. And if you do it again, that gets increased. But you know what some people do? They sort of figure that out so that it becomes part of their business expenses. And that's very sad because
Yes.
that happens. People say, okay, I'll violate, I pay the fine and that's it. So our fines do increase in number. And the other thing, the other tool, education is key. I think you have to really get people to understand that you're not just complaining about the sound, you're talking about your health and well-being. Let me give you another thing in terms of money. In New York, we talk about aircraft noise. We know the airlines are well-funded. They use the excuse, if we quiet things down, it'll cost us money. Let me tell you what cost everyone, including all the people in Toronto, money. When people are exposed to noise, the studies we've done, we've used aircraft noise because you have larger numbers. There's an increased risk for cardiovascular disorders. There's an increased risk for stress and anxiety. And that costs money because you're going to doctors and hospitals. And who ends up paying that cost? We all do, right? The citizens are paying the costs of the loud instruments affecting the lives of nearby residents. And let's talk money, because money talks. And so I say to people, oh, the airlines don't want to modify it, I cost them some money. Well, what about the dollars I have to contribute each year to remedy the health effects of people impacted by noise? So don't leave costs out. That also is important.
Absolutely. And that is one of my largest arguments and biggest, I keep going back to health, and that's where they want to, like, so we've got an area where the Gardner is being reconstructed. It's being demolished and reconstructed because it needs to be rehabilitated. It's an elevated expressway. And they want to make the construction 24/7 because they know the cost of people sitting in traffic. But I don't think they actually know the cost of the people that now can't sleep at night, are continuously bothered. I did a 3-week measurement off of that area. The 3-week average was 95 decibels. 95 decibels, day, night, for 3 weeks. It was absolutely insane. And we figured out that that's when it was actually being demolished. And so we do not know the cost. I don't think there's a number out there of the cost of lack of sleep and loss of productivity. I think we know presenteeism is certainly something where people go to work and they're physically there, but they're not mentally there. And now that we have a lot of work from home, people can kind of be in their pajamas, all day long, and or just put on a fancy shirt, right? So there's lots we need to know about it. And that's where educating people and getting us together to really be advocates for protecting our health, because that's finally what it is. I know so many people that take sleeping pills to go to sleep, then they have wake up pills to wake up, they're addicted to coffee, then they maybe self-medicate through alcohol or other substance abuse. And if it doesn't go away, that's the only place we have to go.
But think about children. I think
Children.
my two studies did so well is that children's learning was being impacted. And by the 6th grade, they were nearly a year behind in reading.
So
that hit home. But also remember, those children would need remediation, and that cost money. So when the airlines fly over schools and the school children are impacted and their learning is impacted, it's going to cost money to remediate them. Fortunately, I have to say the FAA in the US, using my studies and the studies that followed, spent about $400 million to quiet schools near airports. So try to understand there's a cost. And children are living in the homes and they can't get sleep at night. And how well will they do at school? So let's not forget that children are being impacted health-wise and may also be impacted in school. And as you say, with people working from home, there is much more now intrusive on the production with respect to work.
Yeah. And seniors as well, you know, like that's where if it's a loud environment, seniors can't hear and they maybe don't feel safe on streets. And so then they don't go outside and they don't talk with people, and that increases isolation, Alzheimer's, dementia. All of that is so well proven, right?
Okay. Yes.
Absolutely. So it's on all ends of the spectrum. None of us have a defense. We cannot close our ears and our bodies can't stop listening. So I've got one more question for you from the chat, and that is, whereabouts do you live in New York? How is noise pollution in Manhattan versus Brooklyn versus Queens, Roosevelt Island, Staten Island?
Right.
That'll be the last question for today.
Let me invite people. I live in Manhattan, all right? I live on the Upper East Side, but I live near the river. My home is just a half avenue block away from the river, and I walk along the river for a number of blocks. And on the other side of the river is a park. So here I am, I'm living in Manhattan. I live in a street where a bus goes by, but I was also a consultant to the Transit Authority, so I may have some input in quieter buses. The point I'm making, there are so many parks in New York City. If you go west from my home, you get to Central Park. So on the east, I have the river. I have a river and a park nearby, and then I have Central Park. The good thing about the boroughs, Staten Island has some fabulous parks. So does the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. We have these wonderful areas. And so what I also write about is that we must protect those areas, make sure they stay relatively quiet. Because yes, if you walk down streets in New York, the traffic noise is loud. One thing you'll notice, New Yorkers walk very quickly. I've hypothesized that they're trying to get away from the noises to a quieter area. And one thing about New Yorkers, when they go into their homes, they know the streets were a bit noisy. When they go into their homes, they expect quiet. So all the boroughs have quiet areas and unfortunately noisy ones, so that I work with people in all the boroughs to try to lessen the noise in the noisiest areas. But do come to my home, you'll find I have double glazed windows. And you will find it's quiet.
Awesome. I do have one more question. I kind of jumped the gun here because I just looked in the attendees and I see that Kathy McDonald has her hand
I want to say hello to Kathy.
Yeah, I see Kathy. So Kathy, I'm asking you to unmute.
Hi.
Ask to unmute. Let's see. There you are.
Oh, I've got too many screens open here. Okay, there. Okay.
How you
Thanks
doing?
so much for joining, Kathy.
Well, I couldn't miss it. I wanted to hear your voice again, Arline, and
thank you.
Wisdom, and also to thank, as always, Ingrid for all the work you are doing. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Do you have a question for Arline?
Pardon?
Do you have a question for Arline?
Yeah, when are you coming to Toronto again?
I may be coming for a couple of days, the end of October. This was the first time that I had not been to Toronto for a few years.
Yeah.
Because I go to all my family events, and you knew that my mother was Canadian.
Yes.
And that I had, as a child, I actually lived in Toronto for a while. Hopefully I can get there, and then I would let you know, so maybe we can meet in person.
Well, maybe you and Ingrid and I can get together.
I would love it. I'm coming in, actually, my daughter, son-in-law, we're going to be driving, so we may stop off in Niagara Falls. But I miss Toronto because essentially I miss my family. So I'm going to be honest with you. And plus, I'd love to see you guys.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think on that nice little personal note, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who is we've still got 10 attendees. Some people have dropped off, but I do want to thank you very much. I knew that this wouldn't be quite as or I shouldn't say well attended, but it wouldn't be quite as popular as motor vehicle noise, let's say, because amplified sound is really certain pockets of the city. And so I do really want to, even though we didn't have, 80 participants, it's sometimes not the volume, it's not the number, it's the quality and who is showing up. And it's all about who shows up. And it really only takes a few people to really start to move the needle. And by doing something, you are helping, you're confirming to me that the work that we're doing is good, and also being engaged. I certainly hope that you take the opportunity to visit nomorenoisetoronto.com, sign up for our newsletter, because that's how you'll get to know when the night economy is coming up. When I provide speaking notes, I provide meetups so that people can be educated and informed and feel empowered to speak up from their position. So with that, Arline, my thanks to you.
Thank you.
You've been, when I got a call from Arline in January of this year, and I'm like, Arline Bronzaft has given me a call. That's just amazing. You are a trailblazer and a visionary, and a mentor to me. So I really thank you very much.
But it's people like you that allow my voice to be heard. So I need people like Kathy, people like you, Ingrid, and Janine, I know is on. I work closely with her in New York. It's these people that allows this issue to become much more prevalent in the world. And people are now beginning to pay more attention to noise.
Absolutely. I never thought I never thought I would have this kind of support. I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And here we are.
I know what it was like 20, 30 years ago.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So everyone, thank you very much for attending this session on the night economy with Dr. Arline Bronzaft with No More Noise. And I wish you all a great day, and I wish you an even better sleep. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.